The first time
shadows
anyone
gather.
in Dodge
We must
City
pray for
heard Sister
deliverance.
Prayer
Catherine
won't fix this. We
scream
need a plan.
was the
Faith is
morning
our shield.
old Mr. Harper died sitting upright in his rocking chair. Folks swore his eyes were still open. Some said he had been dead since dawn, but it was Catherine who stepped on his porch to bring him medicine and came running back down the street, yelling that he was smiling at her. People talked about that scream for weeks. They joked that even heaven must have jumped, but what they did not know was this. That scream was nothing compared to the one she let out later. By the time you hear what made her scream the second time, you might feel it in your own chest. The one that started everything. It began on a burning hot afternoon near the Cimarron. Sister Catherine O'Rourke was driving the mission wagon alone. The sun was so sharp it felt like it sliced straight through her veil. The trail was empty, no rider, no cattle, no sign of trouble, until she heard a sound that did not belong to summer. A short, sharp crack from somewhere beyond the ridge, not thunder, not a snapping branch. She had heard that sound once before outside the mission gate. Gunshot. She stopped the wagon, called out once, got no answer. She stepped down and walked toward the tall grass. Then she saw him, a man leaning against a bale of hay behind an old log house, his shirt soaked dark on one side, his face pale, like the sun had drained the color right out of him. He looked at her as if he had been waiting for her all day, like the whole hot afternoon had been holding its breath just to bring the two of them together. His lips were dry, his voice barely there. "Sister, I need your help." He tried to push himself up, failed. When she reached him, his hand shot out and grabbed her wrist. It was not rough. It was desperate. The kind of grip a man gives when he knows he's losing strength fast. He pulled her closer. His breaths were shaky, shallow, broken. "Sit. Please sit right here. Just trust me." She thought he was delirious, thought he did not know what he was saying. But then she saw the wound on his leg, a gunshot close to the artery, blood pulsing out slow but steady. She knew enough to understand what that meant. If she did not put weight on it, he would bleed out before sundown. So she sat where he told her to sit, right there on that bale of hay, right over the place where the wound hid beneath her. The moment she sat down, she felt the heat of his blood through her clothes, and something else, a hard shape pressed against the hay, a worn leather pouch, stuffed so full it almost poked upward. His eyes met hers, and for the first time she saw fear in a grown man look exactly like a prayer. What was inside that pouch, and why had someone tried to kill him for it? Catherine felt her heartbeat pounding in her ears as she pressed her weight on his wound. The man tried to steady his breathing. It came out shaky, uneven, almost like a horse trying to stand after a long winter. He whispered his name, Jack Hollister, and that he was not supposed to still be alive. She asked who shot him. His answer was a slow exhale that sounded more like regret than fear. People who did not want the truth getting out. Then his eyes rolled for a second. She panicked, pressed harder, told him to stay with her. He forced a breath and nodded. She did not know how she managed it, but somehow she got him onto the mission wagon. He was heavy. Every bump in the trail made him groan. The sun was dropping lower, turning the grass gold. She kept talking to him, partly to keep him awake, partly so she would not think about the blood drying on her skirt. She said things she usually kept to herself, that she missed her mother, that she hated Kansas dust, that she had never sat on a wounded man in her entire life and hoped she never would again. He tried to smile at that. It came out crooked. When the wagon reached his ranch, she felt a strange pull in her chest. Something in that empty yard felt like it had been waiting on her, too. The place looked forgotten. The barn sagged. The house had one shutter barely hanging on, but it was peaceful, the kind of quiet that made even a scared woman breathe easier. Inside the barn, she laid him on a blanket. The wound was worse than she thought. A clean-through shot, but deep and torn. Someone had aimed to kill, not warn. She cleaned it with what little she had. Tore part of her underskirt for bandages. He flinched when the cold water hit. Then apologized for flinching. That made her laugh without meaning to. It surprised both of them. When she checked the leather pouch she had felt earlier, he tensed like a man waiting for a punch. She opened it just enough to see the edge of a little book, the kind a shopkeeper uses for debts. But this one was older, worn, filled with names and numbers, written fast and angry. There was also a badge that did not belong to him, and a letter with a broken wax seal. Tucked beneath the ledger was a small photograph, worn soft at the edges. A young woman stood beside Jack, her smile bright, her hand on his arm. Catherine did not ask who she was, but Jack watched her face closely, as if the memory still lived in him like an old ache. She looked at him. His eyes told her everything. He was in trouble far bigger than a leg wound. And saving him meant she was in it too. She wrapped the bandage tight. Saving his life was the easy part, and somewhere deep down she already knew it. Then sat back, her hands shaking. She had never asked for danger, never asked for secrets, but both had come to her anyway. What was she supposed to do now with a wounded stranger, a pouch full of trouble, and night falling fast outside? Catherine barely slept that night. Every time the wind pushed against the old barn board, she thought someone was coming for Jack. She kept checking his bandage, checking his breathing, checking the door, even prayed a little, though it sounded more like arguing with heaven than asking for help. Right before sunrise, she slipped back into Dodge City for supplies. The streets were quiet. A few saloon lamps still burned low, like tired eyes refusing to close. She headed toward the general store, keeping her veil low, but halfway there she heard shouting, a man yelling that he had rights. Two others kicking over his tools. It was the Ramirez family. Good people, hard-working. They lived near the river. But this morning their porch was smashed, their windows broken, and their young boy was being shoved against a tree by two men she did not recognize. She rushed forward without thinking, told them to stop, told them the boy was scared and half asleep and hurting. One man turned to her with the slow smile of someone who enjoyed breaking things. He said the Ramirez family had not paid enough for grazing rights. Said they needed a reminder. She told them to leave. Her voice did not even shake. Maybe her nerves were too tired to shake. The bigger man stepped close enough that she could smell last night's whiskey on his clothes. He told her to mind her own business. Then he slapped the boy hard enough to knock him down. That moment did something to her. Something sharp and hot. It was the first time in her life she understood that staying quiet was its own kind of sin. She knelt beside the boy and held him, even while the men walked away laughing. Later, she learned their names. Silas McGraw's men, the same men who had hunted Jack, the same men who would hunt again. And suddenly the numbers in that leather pouch made sense. The violence, the threats, the fear in every rancher's voice. It all pointed to the same man running Dodge City like a private kingdom. And once you see who is really holding the whip hand, you cannot unsee it, no matter how much you wish you could. When Catherine returned to the barn, she told Jack everything. He listened without blinking. When she finished, he looked at her with tired eyes and said the part she already knew in her heart. Silas will not stop. Not until he owns every acre near this river. Not until anyone who stands in his way is gone. She sat beside Jack on the barn floor. The morning light came through the boards in thin lines. She realized she was already involved, already too deep, and maybe she did not want to step back out. Before we continue, take a slow sip of your tea and settle in. Tell me what time it is for you and where you're listening from. And if you would like more stories like this, you can tap subscribe so you do not miss the next part. Catherine had never planned a trap in her life. She had never even chased a chicken without feeling guilty after. But that evening, sitting on the barn floor beside Jack, she realized something plain and simple. If they waited for the law in Dodge City to help them, they would be burying him by the end of the week. So right there on that dirt floor, a quiet woman and a half-broken rancher started planning a move that could get them both killed. So she asked the question that surprised even her. What do we do now? Jack looked at her like a man who had been waiting for her to say those words. He told her there was only one chance. They needed more evidence, not just numbers on a page. They needed signatures, letters.